Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kelly Hatfield and I represent the defendant, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson was the president of Flinders Aluminum for 12 years. He was a hardworking man who dedicated his extra time, money, and attention to the business. He loved his company and employees that worked there. He would never do anything to jeopardize the livelihood of his workers or the fate of his company. At this trial, you'll hear about how Flinders Aluminum had a fire insurance policy with Mismo Fire Insurance, and how last year Flinders suffered a major fire that burned down the entire factory. However, when Flinders tried to collect on their claim, Mismo refused to pay out, arguing that it was a result of an arson, specifically orchestrated by Arthur Jackson. That his attempt to collect the insurance proceeds was a fraud against Mismo. Ladies and gentlemen, over these next couple of days, I will prove to you that this assertion that Mr. Jackson committed arson and fraud is untrue, unfounded, and wrong. So this is the evidence that I want you to pay attention to as we go along the trial. First, you're going to hear testimony from Mrs. Jackson, Mr. Jackson's wife. And you'll hear her talk about that night of the fire. He was talking about his new tool and die designer, Mr. Avery, and about their new plan to make the company get out of its financial rut. When they got that call that night at 9:45 p.m. that the fire destroyed the factory, you'll hear that Mr. Jackson was visibly shaken. You'll hear her say that Mr. Jackson had done nothing to make her believe that he would burn down his own business, and that she's certain he did not. Then you'll hear from Miss Peterson. And Miss Peterson was an administrative assistant to Mr. Jackson. And he had hired her to help the company with its financial struggles. Specifically, the company had suffered substantial losses over the past few years. There was a $400,000 loan that was due in November of that year. And Mr. Jackson had a plan he was developing to help save the company. That involved a new business plan where he would retool the company, make aluminum parts for automobiles. So I want you to pay attention to her testimony when I question her on the stand. From this questioning, I will show you that her role as an administrative assistant was to help the company out of its financial rut, that she did legitimate work to help move the business plan along, and that she even suggested the hiring of Mr. Avery to help with the retooling of the plant because he was a tool and die designer and he had an excellent reputation. Then you're going to hear from Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson was the vice president of First Trust Bank, where Flinders had the $400,000 loan. And you'll hear how Mr. Jackson tried tirelessly to renegotiate this loan with Mr. Anderson, but to no avail. But you'll also hear from Mr. Anderson that the bank was actually interested in investing in this new business plan. So much so that he even wrote to the loan review committee that this was going to be a very promising investment, and you will hear that testimony from him. Lastly, you'll hear from Mr. Pincus. Mr. Pincus is an expert that will be testifying that the fire was caused by an accident. And you'll hear that his colleagues consider him to be fair-minded, balanced in his approach, that he has 33 years of firefighting experience, that he became the deputy fire marshal in Nita City, where he supervised a team of arson investigators, a total of 20 of them in one team. And he will testify that based on his analysis of the facts and based on his experience, that the Flinders fire was the result of an accident. So ladies and gentlemen, these facts I just laid out will be presented to you over the next couple of days. From these facts, you will be able to determine, just like the expert Mr. Pincus, that the fire was the result of an accident, and that Mr. Jackson would never personally or through someone else willfully and maliciously burn down the company he dedicated his blood, sweat, and tears to. And you will find that Mr. Jackson took no action that showed an intent to defraud Mismo Fire Insurance. Mr. Jackson worked too hard to throw 12 years of his life away in a single night. And he was a man who wanted to succeed in business the right way. Thank you.